Hey guys, it's Trisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you my spoiler-free review for Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I received an ARC of this book from the bookstore that I work at. It is set to release on January 16th, which should be tomorrow if I am uploading this on time. Before I get into my review, I do want to just mention that because I'm new to BookTube, I'm not familiar with all of the big booktubers or with all of the people in the community, and so I didn't know who Sasha or Lindsay were before I started reading this, and I didn't know about them in the community until after I finished my review. So them having channels or whatever, I don't really know who they are because I've never visited their channels, if that's what it is that they have. I've never watched any of their videos. So that has no bearing on my review and my thoughts on the book as a whole. So as you can see from the bright pink and all of that goodness there, I had lots of thoughts on this, so we'll just get right on into my review. So Zenith is about a starship captain, Androma, or Andy for short, and her crew of female mercenaries. After a particularly disastrous mission, Andy finds herself coming face to face with a part of her past that she had been trying to run from for years. And with her personal history staring her in the face, Andy agrees to take the crew on their most soul-testing mission that they've ever been on. And the stakes are high because upon successful completion of this mission, all of their criminal records will be wiped clean and Andy will finally have her freedom. But the endeavor is actually much more dangerous than they originally thought, because across the galaxy there is a ruler of a planet who is gathering power to exact revenge for the destruction of her planet and the decimation of her people. So first I want to talk about the world building. So this is a light sci-fi that spends most of the time in the ships that they use to travel from one planet to another. So most of the time is spent there. There are planets that we do get to experience that are crafted quite well, I think, that they feel like places that are established and that have lots of culture, and there was thought really put into the crafting of these individual planets. So I really appreciated that aspect of this novel. However, there are parts of the world building that feel like a mishmash that have been taken from different elements in sci-fi stories, movies, novels, what have you, that were kind of put in here that I can easily identify from other places. So sometimes it might be something in the story that really triggered something, or part of the world that really triggered me to remember another sci-fi type story that I had seen it in before. For example, there is a part of the book that takes place in a bar or something like that, and it really reminded me of a mishmash of the cantina from the Star Wars original trilogy mashed with the diner that Obi-Wan visits in the Star Wars prequel trilogy. So that was really interesting that it didn't feel completely unique. In addition to that, there is a character in here that has, I think, though this is a sci-fi, has some sort of magic, and I didn't really understand that. It wasn't fully explained. It was just all of a sudden there's a character that has some sort of magic compulsion of sorts. So that wasn't really explored. It wasn't really explained. And so I think that that was something that did a disservice to the world building. So overall, there was some really great world building with small details that I really appreciated. But then there were some things that lacked explanation and clarity that I would have liked to have seen more thought put into. So the characters on this, I think, were the weakest part of the book for me. So Andy as a main character had some pretty contradictory personality traits that dominated her as a person for almost 3/4 of the novel. She felt like an undefined character for most of the time. For example, she is meant to have a lot of heart and a lot of understanding and a lot of inner turmoil at the lives that she has to take in order to protect herself and her crew. But at the same time, there are other parts of the story where she seems to enjoy and look forward to the conflict and fighting people who oppose her and stand in the way of her mission, and almost like she revels in the opportunity to fight someone and potentially kill them. And this contradictory personality trait didn't really make any sense because Andy is known throughout the galaxy as the Bloody Baroness, this female mercenary who leaves a path of death and destruction in her wake. So she adopts this persona of the Bloody Baroness at times where she seems to revel in the power that killing and fighting gives her, but then spends all of this time lamenting the lives that she does have to take. And it ultimately made it really hard to connect to her as a character. There are contradictory personality traits that do extend to other characters in the books, but Andy was the most obvious example of it. Lyra is Andy's second in command, and ultimately, I found her to be more of a compelling and interesting character than Andy herself. Lyra felt more like the captain, and Andy felt more like a bystander who couldn't really make decisions as far as in the moment she has to command and lead, especially since a lot of the time her crew, and yes, they are her friends, but her crew have a hard time taking orders from her. And that's something that I found really hard to swallow because they understand that she is the captain and that they need to do what she says, but it seemed almost as if they were more willing to take those orders from Lyra than Andy. So ultimately, I felt like the character depth and the personalities of the characters were the weakest part of this book for me. For the plot, at its core, this book had such an amazing premise that wasn't really executed with the finesse that I was looking for. There were really fascinating subplots that were woven in here to add character depth and development, but they were ultimately unnecessary in my opinion. I feel like we could have gotten the same ends by exploring the characters through a different way, and it would have taken a lot less time. In addition, there were some scenes in here, actually entire chapters, that I felt like were unnecessary, that were meant to serve the purpose, I guess, of developing the characters in a way that we had already seen them. We already understood what was going on. So these scenes weren't necessary. They could have been cut. And throughout the story, there are multiple POV shifts. So certain chapters we will follow certain characters, and I don't mind that in stories. However, we follow, if I'm counting correctly, 6 different characters' point of view at points throughout this story. The story would have been better served had we only followed 2, maybe 3 of these characters. The POV shifts had 2 ultimate problems when we followed all 6 of these different characters. One, it caused pacing issues for me. It caused the entire middle of the book to make me feel like I was slogging through it. And 2, the POV shifts ultimately revealed too much too soon. I was able to predict the twist of this book not even 80 pages in. That's a full 400 pages before it actually happens. And then I was able to guess the secondary twist to the major twist several hundred pages before it happened as well. And it was all because of the POV shifts. If those had not been in there, it would have been near impossible to guess the twist of the end of this book. So while there was an amazing premise with this, and yes, filled with some cliches and some hokey writing, that doesn't bother me. I feel like the POV shifts did a huge disservice to the plot that the authors had come up with. And lastly, I do want to talk about something that was in this book that is not part of my normal review structure. I normally talk about world building and characters and then ultimately the plot. But there is something in here that I feel like is really necessary to talk about. And it was something that happened in the book that almost made me put it down. I was going to DNF it, but I felt like I was already halfway through it and I deserved to finish it to see if it was something that I could understand as the story went on. So I don't know that this quite deserves a trigger warning, and correct me if I'm wrong. Please let me know down in the comments if you think this is deserving of a trigger warning. But there is a non-consensual relationship that happens in this book. There is non-consensual sex. The reason that I'm not sure if I should give it a trigger warning is because it is not explicit. It alludes to it, but there is still non-consensual sex in this book, and it really bothered me. So without any spoilers, there is a character in this story who has compulsion. Like I mentioned, they have this kind of ability where they can get people to do what they want, to get them to feel a certain way and do certain things. And that character uses her compulsion to make a male character have sex with her. And to me, that is rape. That really upset me that that was in this book. It was, in my eyes, unnecessary. I will do a full discussion on it that you can watch that will contain spoilers, but just because she is using compulsion and he agrees to it, though compulsed, he agrees to it and goes through with the act in a non-aggressive way, does not make it not rape. It is still rape, and it's still rape even though it's a female doing it to a male. It is still rape. It still made me very uncomfortable. I almost DNF'd this book because of that scene. That is something to consider in this. And again, please let me know in the comments down below if you think that is something that is worthy of a trigger warning, because I would like to properly articulate that in my review on Goodreads. So overall, it had a really great premise. Some of the characters were pretty good. I liked the world building for the most part, but the poor character development and the plot line being given away too early in the story, and then that non-consensual relationship really caused me to bring my review down on this. I did read this in one day. The more time I spent crafting my review on this, the more solid of a 2.5 I feel this is for me. So that is it for my spoiler-free review of Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read this yet, or if you're planning on reading it. You know, if you have read it, what did you think about it? And if you are so interested in watching my discussion on my spoilery discussion about the non-consensual relationship in this book, you know, feel free to do so. Know that it will contain spoilers and you're watching at your own risk, but definitely I would love to have a conversation about this in the comments below. Spoiler-free, spoilery comments in my other video, which I will link. And if you liked this review and you want to see more videos from me in the future, be sure to click the subscribe button down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!